Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
For you on the Facebook side of it.
Team, welcome to the MMOA podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Musgrave, Doctor of Physical Therapy. I am super excited to bring to you a very special guest, Dr. Robert Barker, retired family medicine physician as of October of 2021. After 40 years of practice serving his community, graduated from Appalachian State University and LSU Shreveport Medical School, residency at WFU, Bowman Gray School of Medicine, married to his wife, Jessie, happily for 42 years, father of 4 with 9 grandchildren. Welcome, Dr. Barker.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Dr. Barker, we got kind of reconnected just recently, going to visit the in-laws in the beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina. You are a retired family medicine physician, but you've also encountered some recent challenges. But I would love to hear just a little bit more about you and to share with our listeners about your hobbies and interests, kind of what you like to do for fun. And then we'll talk about recent onset of symptoms and diagnosis. So take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. After medical school and residency at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, we lived in Montana a couple of years and then moved back to the Western North Carolina area, where I went from solo practice to group practice to hospital practice, and worked in the little community I grew up in and went to primary school in, took care of teachers and coaches and friends and family for years and years, and retired 2 years ago. It was very timely. A year before retirement, I started having symptoms that I was concerned could be a movement disorder, but kind of muddled through it and worked the best I could and finished strong. And then I got the official diagnosis of Parkinson's disease about 2 years ago. And a little bit of a blow to start with. I adjusted within a few days and started visiting blog sites and looking at treatment options, and with the help of my neurologist, had a little bit better direction. But it's been more of a blessing than a curse for me. It's enabled me to get back in touch with a lot of things I've enjoyed my whole life, including exercise. It makes me more mindful of the time we have. All of us will go through something where we will develop a disability or an illness, or at least with our close loved ones, the death rate's 100% still.
Hovering around 100%, right?
Except maybe 1. But that's good to know and keep in mind, and it makes you more mindful of the things that you can enjoy in the present. And I really reconnected with exercise, which I'd enjoyed through the years. And I think that's where you and your group comes in, helping to encourage. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs some instruction at some point. And sometimes it's that encouragement and that pointing people in the right direction gets them to where they need to be.
Absolutely. And, you've been an active guy. From my understanding, most of your life, what are been your main hobbies and interests leading up to this diagnosis?
Well, I've always enjoyed the outdoors, particularly running, trail running, hiking, backpacking. Climbed a lot of mountains out west. Did the Boston Marathon while I was in med school in 1979. And, a lot of the exercise, like a lot of folks, you get into the workaday world and raising kids and your jobs, and exercise goes on the back burner. And I was able to reconnect in my 40s with a local race here. It's called the Mount Mitchell Challenge and Black Mountain Marathon. Starts in the little town of Black Mountain, comes through the town that I live in, Montreat, and hits trails all the way to the highest peak east of the Mississippi River, which is Mount Mitchell at 6,684 feet.
That's incredible.
Mount Mitchell Challenge is a 40-mile race, and the Black Mountain Marathon is 26, and they run together. The marathon just turns around sooner. But anyway, I've been able to experience that and be involved in that. This will be the 27th year this coming February, and I'm signed up for my 27th race in that. There's that have done it every year. So
That's so incredible. Not missed a year. Most people would be happy if they could do something like that once. And here you are, you're coming up soon to be on your 30th rep of a very challenging race. If the listeners are not familiar with that, you should look at the elevation gain and loss on that race. One of the things I would love for you to just share from your perspective, what were some of those early symptoms that you might have had a movement disorder?
Yeah, that can be very helpful for healthcare providers because, there's 500,000 people with the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in the United States. There's 90,000 new diagnoses every year. And out of those 500,000, there's probably a lot more than that are misdiagnosed or not diagnosed yet. They've not. And a lot of times you folks might see people for the very problems that a movement disorder is producing, and nobody's recognized exactly what it is yet. The year prior to my official diagnosis, I had a little bit of balance issues, a little bit of a tremor, which I was hoping would be the more common action tremor or familial tremor that a lot of people have, where you're writing or holding a cup of coffee or cup of tea and your hand shakes, or holding a book. But it progressed to a tremor at rest, which is a little more of a hallmark of Parkinson's. A little bit of the four main motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease is a tremor at rest, bradykinesia or slow movement, usually affecting one side of the body first, usually the arm before the legs, but usually one side, muscle rigidity and movement of the same side, and then postural instability of just the posture is off, or more of a hump down, closed in, kind of like a patient being in a box, or balance issues with that. And I noticed a little bit of balance. Other motor things, I noticed a softening of my voice at the end of the day. It does. Sometimes people notice. There's a lot of non-motor symptoms as well, anxiety, depression. I've never had issues with that needed any real addressing, but it's a pretty big hit to have a diagnosis of any kind of chronic disorder. So you need a great emotional support. You need a spiritual support. I'm a big believer that nothing will ever come into my life except through God's hand. And I pray for healing, of course, but I'm going to do my part. And it's been a great adventure with my friends and my family and with the Lord. I have no regrets, and I'm turning into a blessing at this point in my life. I'm glad to share some of the ways that I've coped with it and dealt with it and are still walking in this adventure.
Yeah, I think you brought up just so many wonderful points. It's just like the variation in the different types of symptoms, those categories, and kind of where that tremor, went from a familial tremor to that tremor at rest is a hallmark sign that really separates that could be mistaken for just a normal part of the aging experience that sometimes happens. I also love that you shared about the emotional support and what's really needed there, because oftentimes people don't know that there's any hope with this condition, because oftentimes people aren't as active as you and they're not as proactive with their treatment. I would love to hear, once it was pretty clear, the diagnosis, the signs had stacked up, what was your next step? Where did you start with research and with treating this condition?
I joined several websites, looked at the Parkinson's Foundation. There's a great foundation in Colorado called the Davis Phinney Foundation. Davis Phinney was an Olympic bicyclist that was diagnosed with Parkinson's in his early 40s, and he's still around, and that foundation does a lot of good work. This last year, the Mount Mitchell race was able to raise over $10,000 for the Davis Phinney Foundation and getting donations for the race.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So blog sites, there's one called Health. I'll get it for you before the end. Health. Health Unblocked, and you can sign up for different chronic diseases and get on the blog sites. Patients, it's a great resource for patients called Health Unblocked. But I was led to a lot of links on different websites on that, including one from Northwestern University's movement disorder clinic, a Dr. Corcus, that had a great topic on exercise and how it slows down the progressions of Parkinson's disease. Maybe you could share that link with people. But
absolutely. I'll share that in the show notes so that people can follow those if they're looking for resources for themselves or for their patients. That's great. So based on your research, what were kind of the hallmark things that you decided you need to tackle first or maybe adjust?
Well, there's three, and really you could add a fourth in. That video goes over it quite well. And it's really commonsensical for folks in y'all's position, but it's something that people need to be reminded of on a regular basis. I mean, if exercise was a prescription that you could just write a pill and people would take, they would pay hundreds of dollars a month for it. There's no question. That's not just for Parkinson's disease. It's for any kind of chronic illness or any kind of disability, Alzheimer's disease, dementia problems, cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal disorders, all the kind of things you see. Exercise is the prescription. And I got a great quote from Oscar Wilde, playwright, Irish playwright, worked in London, I guess the 1800s. He said, to get back my youth, I would do anything in the world except take exercise, get up early, or be respectable. I'm going to pick one of the three. Exercise. You don't have to be respectable. You don't have to get up early. But if you want to regain your youth, follow Oscar Wilde's advice. But in the realm of exercise, the three biggies are endurance exercise, aerobic, where you get your heart rate up. Running certainly is one of the good ones. Swimming, biking, treadmill, elliptical, stair climber, rowing machine. Any way you can get your heart rate up, and use a little formulas to get people up to 80% of their max and try to keep it there. So endurance exercise. And one way you can monitor patients that come into clinics is always check their heart rate. And, if you see that their heart rate is moved from the 90s down to the 80s or the 70s or even the 60s, 50s, make mention of that. And it's a good monitor that people are actually using the prescriptions that you give them for exercise. But heart rate's a great monitor. But endurance aerobic exercise is maybe the bedrock. People, if you can still walk, that's excellent. Walking is hopefully what we're all left with that we can do as we get older and older. And trail running is an excellent sport and extra activity for Parkinson's because it includes balance and lateral movements, rocks and stumps and roots. And I'd have to say I've slowed down over time, but that just means less falls when you're trail running because you get a speed, especially downhill. It's easy to catch a root or a rock, and you just have to be careful. And the better you exercise, the more you exercise, the better you survive falls too. The two big killers in Parkinson's disease eventually are falls and pneumonia, and exercise is prescribed to help prevent both of those.
I want to circle back to a couple of things you brought up. One of the things at our division, we actually started a hashtag called Vitals Are Vital, making sure we get baseline measurements, and then we're watching the response to exercise. But to your point, we also have to monitor our patients. If we want them to get some type of treatment effect out of what we're doing, we've got to make sure they're hitting sufficient intensity and maintaining it for a duration that they can actually benefit. So I love that you touched on that.
Yeah, keeping track of repetitions and the exercise you give people, how many reps they can do, how many times they can do the reps, really is a real measure that they're following through on what you're doing. And, the idea is to be younger next year and not just to have a steady decline. And it's possible. It really is. This past year, I did the Black Mountain Marathon part of the race, the 26.2. And it's, like I say, a trail run that's gaining over 2,500 feet before the turnaround. And I was able to cut 18 minutes off my time from the year before. And
that's incredible.
68, I should be happy with that, let alone 68 with Parkinson's disease.
Absolutely. And a lot of people would be happy if they could just complete it. But here you are after diagnosis, a year wiser, a year more experienced, and a year faster. Yeah. Just incredible what's possible if we take exercise and our health and nutrition seriously. I'm curious, Dr. Barker, are there any strength training exercises that you're doing?
Well, after endurance training or aerobic exercise, the next pillar would be resistance training. And weights would be ideal, dumbbells, kettlebells. I keep a 25-pound kettlebell here at the house. If I can't get out, there's a lot of good exercises you can do with that. Ideal, go into a gym where you're challenged by other people and by the machines or the free weights themselves. But resistance trainings, though, we know that resistance training increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps, is a neuroprotective effect. It just slows down dementia, slows down Parkinson's progression. Resistance training is huge. Aerobic training, maybe 3 days a week, 25, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Resistance training is at least 2 days a week, 3 if you could get that in. A lot of times I go to the gym, the Y here in Black Mountain, 3 days a week, and I do both workouts at the same time. I'll do weights for 45 minutes, stay after it pretty hard, and then jump onto an aerobic device of some type. I used to do rowing machine and elliptical, and then finish up with the running some on the treadmill, and I do that for 45 minutes. So I do that 3 days a week, and then other days I hike and run. And I've got to start cranking up my mileage because I'm signed up now for the Mount Mitchell race at the end of February.
I love it. I love it.
And then, of course, stretching, calisthenics, and you can do a lot resistance trainings on your own with bands or machines at home as well.
Yeah, when we were kind of reconnecting, you shared with me a really interesting kind of dynamic balance going across some diagonals. So our clinicians are going to be familiar with PNF patterns, these functional patterns, because of course our world is not just moving forward and back or side to side. There are these functional planes where we'll hit diagonals. And you kind of demonstrated this, like if people are familiar with kind of that skater type movement where you're shifting most of your weight onto one leg and reaching across a diagonal. Could you tell me a little bit more about that exercise and how you use it?
Yeah, that would be just basically your old windmill exercise you learned back in grade school, where you touched a contralateral toe with the right hand to the left foot. But when you come from your right hand to your left foot, step your right leg back, kind of like a skater's pose, and do that back and forth for a while, and then start picking up the leg that's placed to the rear and balancing on one leg as you do it, and doing 20 of those, taking a break, doing 20 more. And, you can start out just doing the treadmill and then start out stepping back with the foot and then start lifting that foot off the ground. But that's an excellent, just standing on one leg for 20, 30 seconds, whatever you can manage. When I first was diagnosed and I started doing some of these things, I was amazed how poor my balance was, particularly on my right leg. But now I can stand on my right leg for 30 seconds. When I'm hiking, I don't get quite as close to the edge of cliffs anymore. But you try to use good sense. But and that brings up the third leg or pillar of this exercise. After endurance training, resistance training, balance and agility exercises. I have agility ladder. I pulled it out this morning after I got back from a little prayer group. I was feeling a little stressed about having an interview with you, so I did the agility ladder in the driveway and went down in the basement and used my speed bag a little bit. There's a Rock Steady Boxing program for Parkinson's patients that's very good. So anything that eye hand coordination is excellent things. I've taken up pickleball in the last 3 months. I've taken up golf in the last 3 months. Different things that challenge you and neuroplasticity, the rewiring of your brain. Folks in OT and PT used to get hold of folks that had strokes, and for a long time they were told, well, after a few months, this is as good as you'll get. This is what to expect. But you can rewire the brain.
Yes.
You have to be more conscious of what you're doing and very mindful of movements. And you have to be able to practice multitasking. I think we talked a little bit about that. My wife and I have an acronym that we use when we hike together to remind me of how to multitask and how to work on neuroplasticity.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple things I want to touch on, and then I want to pick back up right where you are. So I want to make sure that our listeners hone in, because you gave so many different options for aerobic training, resistance training, and balance training. And one of the things we like to do, particularly in our division, is there's such a wide variety in functional abilities of the people that we treat. We've got a few different avatars based on functional level. Someone that maybe is primarily used in a wheelchair for mobility, someone who is primarily using like a cane or a walker. And then we've got people like Dr. Barker here who are very independent, very active, and we call those kind of our active ANAs. So if you were listening carefully, team, there's aerobic training equipment that someone with a lower functional level that maybe can't run or jog on a treadmill. We've got resistance training machines available at gym facilities where people that maybe aren't ready to coordinate free weights just yet can be using machines and defined movements. And then we can progress people along as they progress, or maybe people are just starting out at that functional level where they're ready for free weights and more functional movement patterns. But the same thing, you heard the same thing on balance, right? It could be a static balance on single leg, hanging on to something to steady themselves and working on letting go, all the way up to like this windmill kind of skater movement that Dr. Barker outlined, where it's like maybe we're starting with kind of this old school classic toe touch where we've got both feet on the ground, then we're up on a tiptoe, all the way up to doing that entire dynamic movement all the way on one foot. Incredible coordination balance. So I just want our listeners to really hone in, because we would be super excited to have a Dr. Barker on our caseload, but we're not going to see you because you don't need us, because you're already doing the fitness, the exercise, the balance. You found your way to improving your symptoms and finding that challenge. I just want to make sure that our listeners hone in that all things are scalable to the person in front of you. But one of the reasons I love having Dr. Barker on here is to just show like what's possible if someone is truly hitting the intensity they need to be challenged and they're consistent. Because it almost sounds like you're getting better and stronger since you've had your diagnosis, because it's made you more intentional about your training, and you've been active forever. Essentially, I mean, your entire life, you've been an active guy, but here you are getting fitter and stronger after your diagnosis. It's just completely mind-blowing.
And hearing that from people is a tremendous encouragement. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves as patients that we're not making enough progress. And you guys have a window into people's lives that can be the voice of encouragement, where family members or sometimes people who live in isolation, people with Parkinson's tend to isolate themselves more, and they just don't hear it, and they don't have that input into their lives, which can make all the difference. And just saying a little bit of encouragement of whatever exercise they're doing or whatever part of the training they're in can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's another just great reminder. Now I'd like to pick back up, because one of the really cool things is you came up with an acronym to share with your spouse, kind of a little bit of coded language if there's recognition of symptoms going on. Could you tell us a little more about your acronym and how you use that with your spouse?
Yeah, and I have to give Jessie credit. She came up with as much of it as I did as we were walking. But, when you walk with Parkinson's, you can spot a Parkinson's patient across the parking lot a lot of times, the shuffling gait, or look for one of their arms not to have the arm swing, just hanging at their side and they're swinging one arm. That's a dead giveaway for a Parkinsonism symptom that could be Parkinson's disease. But as we were walking, you can develop a cadence and straighten out your gait, and you have to think about it. But if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and do that over again, you can walk with a normal cadence. Sometimes you have to pick up your pace a little bit, which is actually better for you anyway.
Yep.
Gait you can control if you think about it. And at the same time, the arm swing, if you think about it, if you walk with trekking poles, or if you walk with a rock in your hand or a pocket knife in your hand or a rock, just a stone in your hand, you'll tend to swing the arm more, and you have to think about swinging it. And then your posture, the standing erect, keeping your shoulders up, in walking, thinking a lot of times if you correct your posture, you'll correct your gait and your arm swing. And then the S stands for smile. People with Parkinson's have a poker type face they develop. They can look blank and stare away, and you sometimes have to be brought back to reality. But anyway, we came up with an acronym GAPS, GAPS. And so we were walking, she'll say GAPS, GAPS, GAPS. So the gait, you straighten out your gait. Arm, you do the arm swing. P is posture, you stand erect, work on your posture. And then S, you remember to smile. So GAPS. And so we use that quite a bit. Even when we're in groups, we were at her 50th high school reunion the other night. And as we were walking into the parking lot, she said, remember GAPS. So anyway, it's a little mnemonic that an acronym that you'll run across those recommendations in a lot of the Parkinson's literature, but that just puts it together in a real simple form that you can share with patients.
Yeah, I just love how practical it is, how each one has a very clear activity, symptom, and that it's completely incognito. No one's going to know what GAPS is. So you don't have to be embarrassed about it. If she was barking at you, swing your arms, swing your arms, swing your arms. Oh, you're not making you're not smiling, but it's just it's almost like you've gamified it. It's just a little game. It's just a little bit of coded language back and forth, and it helps you manage your symptoms. I just thought that was super cool that you put the literature together into something super practical and easy to remember.
Yeah, you do have to put things into perspective that it's not anything small about it, but it is a game or a practice or a purpose that you have to be very intentional about. And that helps. It's just one of the many things that helps.
Absolutely. Dr. Barker, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before we close this up, is there anything else you want to share about your journey or anything you want to share with clinicians that they may not be thinking of for their patients that have gotten a new diagnosis or have had a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease? Because you have the unique opportunity to have your medical hat and you have your hat from experience. So anything you think we should keep in mind as clinicians?
Always be willing to think outside the box and let people explore on their own. There's so many supplemental and homeopathic type treatments that can be very good. A lot of them are not in big studies, they're more anecdotal because pharmaceutical companies are not going to make a lot of money off of just over-the-counter products. But a lot of times there's resources where the things that people can do and that people do will keep them functioning way better than just relying on conventional medicine. I have my appointment with my neurologist tomorrow, my 6-month checkup, and most likely she'll say, well, gosh, you're really doing that. Keep it up. I don't have anything to change. And I'm kind of left on my own, but I do a lot of supplements. I do all the B vitamins for different reasons. It's very worthwhile to look into high dose vitamin B1 or thiamine. There's an Italian doctor that has got a lot of YouTube and webinar sites that he died in COVID in 21. But Constantino, I think is his name, but high dose vitamin B1, which can be obtained as a sublingual source from a superior source here in the States. The B2 vitamins are important, B3, niacin, B6, pyridoxine, B9, folic acid, B12, elements, magnesium and zinc is important. Vitamin C is important. I think everybody, regardless of where they are in the stage of life, anybody over 50 should be on vitamin D3 in high doses. A lot of these things are neuroprotective and prevent Parkinson's. A lot of them treat Parkinson's symptoms. Omega-3 fatty acids, high quality fish oil, DHA and EPA in that are anti-inflammatories, the omega-3s. Krill oil gives you choline, is important to take. I've never been to the doctor my whole life until I developed Parkinson's disease. But it's amazing.
You had no practice at being a patient.
The worst at medicine because I've never taken anything, but now, taking all these supplements is pretty amazing. But CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, there's a whole list I could go through. Anything that increases your resveratrol, which is in red wine or purple grapes. Muscadine, purple grapes are one of the highest foods. That's one of my favorite fruits when I can get it in season. There's other different ways to treat too. Near infrared light treatments. There's this light helmet that I have that I put on that was developed in Australia. But near infrared treatments. Now that I have a hobby of beekeeping, I have beehives. I use bee venom therapy. I take my little honeybees and put on my arm and let them sting me about 3 days a week. Wow. Acupuncture supposedly is good. In the balance realm, yoga and Tai Chi, Pilates, that's all part of the, the balance and the stretching part of the exercise prescription. So there's really so many things, your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health is every bit as important. And you can do all the right things. And if you don't have good connection to community and relationships, you're not going to be any better off than the people who don't do anything for themselves.
That's something we've seen an increasing attention in the literature about social isolation and health outcomes. I really appreciate you bringing that topic up as well to make sure that we keep people connected and in community, because you need a good support system to share and be able to enjoy life.
Yeah, fermented foods are very important for Parkinson's disease, neuroprotective. Kombucha, kimchi, the Korean cabbage, sauerkraut, yogurt. There's just so many things and so many resources out there. Once you start, you can't do everything. You have to pick and choose between them. If I was going to pick one thing, it'd be exercise.
Yeah.
Spiritual health is important. Not, we all tend to get anxious. The world seems to be spinning out of control. A lot of broken parts fly off and hit very innocent people. And keeping your focus and keeping your own spiritual wellness in sight is very important. There's a favorite verse in Isaiah. He will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee because he trusts in thee. And I think trust in something bigger and more outside of ourselves is something that can provide us with staying power when the going gets tough, because it's going to get tough for everybody. There's going to be times. Helen Keller said, "A curve in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to turn." So we just have to adapt and turn and accept things that come, accept that things are going to be hard, but never give up, never give in.
Love that. Man, so much great wisdom here. Exercise, aerobic, strength training, balance. Remember, team, all of these things have a place at each functional level. People can participate. And I think another thing we need to keep in check that you highlighted, there are lots of different exercise modalities. Dr. Barker basically does all of them. That's not going to be most of your patients. You're going to have to pick things that they enjoy, that they have an affinity to. So keep an open mind with what your patient actually wants to do, what's practical for them. You're going to have to filter it through that lens to find something they enjoy. Big pluses if it's in community, and also encouraging those social connections and support. He listed some great support groups and resources. I'm going to get all those things together and put them in the show notes. But Dr. Barker, I just want to thank you so much for your time, being vulnerable to share what your experience has been like, but then also to just give our clinicians and our patients that are going to be treated so much hope, because there is so much you can do. And if you're committed to the process and challenging yourself, you can have incredible outcomes. And if you hadn't told me what you were going through, there's no way I would have known that you had a Parkinson's diagnosis. Beyond that, you're continuing to get stronger and fitter. And man, regardless of the Parkinson's piece, I think a lot of us would like to grow up and be as strong and fit as you, regardless of that diagnosis. So thank you to your service for so many patients. Thank you for being vulnerable and coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you, Jeff, very much for having me. It does more for me than it does for you, I'm sure. And maybe you can have me back in a year and see how the Mount Mitchell race went this coming February.
Yeah, that would be absolutely awesome. I would love to do that. We'll have to put that on the calendar.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.